Hello there, welcome to another amazing chapter of stats. So we're going to start chapter 2. Chapter 2 is now using data. You were patient with me through chapter 1. We got through all the collecting data and how to do samples. Now we're going to actually have data. We're going to do work with it. So first of all, this is an introduction. Section 2.1b, we'll do more of it, but just to kind of split it up and get a little bit get started. So we need to organize data in a meaningful way. Notice I call it raw data because raw data is the actual number. Sometimes we change things, like if you think about percentages. When I give a test, my test is not always out of 100 points. Your 87% might be out of, how many ever points there are. That's out of 100. So raw data is the actual test grade. And then when we change it up into percentages or proportions, that's a different way of looking at it. So we need to organize it in order to describe situations, in order to draw conclusions, and make inferences. Remember, descriptive and inferential statistics. So the most basic way, our starting point is always, or almost always, a frequency distribution table. So frequency, right? How often something happens. So this is our most convenient way to organize data. And this is a table. Whoa, this is a table. So it's a table form that uses classes and frequencies. This is kind of always going to be our go-to. We're almost always going to make a frequency table. So there's some things that you need to know because we are going to use them and they're going to be like headers on our frequency tables. The first thing you need to know is class. Our class could be our qualitative or a quantitative category. So again, we have to look at what type of data have we collected. And this groups or describes the data. We don't want to just see a big list of data. We want to group it together so we can look at it and see what it looks like. We can describe that data. And we all know frequency is the number of times something occurs, the number of data values contained in a class. So when we make a frequency table with qualitative data, so qualitative data, remember, is quality or a characteristic or an attribute. We can do that. It just looks a little bit different than how we typically see these things. So first of all, we can use this for data that can be placed in categories. Remember our nominal and our ordinal data. Sometimes there will be a rank, sometimes there won't. So the first thing you should do in order to make this happen, we're going to make a table. I mean, that's kind of the whole big thing, showing the class. Well, if it's qualitative data, a class is that particular thing. If I think hair colors, I might have a class that's brown, a class that's blonde, a class that's strawberry blonde, a class that's auburn. I could go really crazy with that. Then you're going to count the frequency of each category. So we've all seen tally marks, right, where you do the 1, 2, 3, 4, cross it out for a 5. Tally marks are very helpful. Some people don't like to do that. If you've got a lot of data, it gets messy and you lose your place and you have to start all over. So I highly, highly recommend using tally marks. And you're going to calculate your totals for each column. And then you are going to find your percentage, right? So that's your frequency over n. So your percentage, the book sometimes calls it proportion. So if you prefer a straight fraction, n stands for sample size. N will always stand for sample size for the rest of the year. There's your first abbreviation. So the number of tallies in each class divided by the total number of pieces of data that you made. That's your percentage. That's going to come out actually as a proportion. You're going to multiply by 100 to get your percentage. So if we're talking about blood type, we've got 25 Army inductees given a blood test, determine their blood type. Here's our data set over here. Notice I already filled in the classes. Here is the class is each blood type. It is qualitative data. I think we talked about this in one assignment. This would be nominal. There is no blood type that is better than others. Some might argue the universal donor and all that kind of stuff, but A is the same as AB. It's all pretty much the same. So we're going to go through here. We're going to do our frequency. So we're going to tally mark this out. Then we'll find our percentage. So do this however you like. You could go just right across the rows. I do have a tendency to cross things out to make sure I've used it so I don't lose my place. I'm going to take a quick minute. You take a quick minute. Let's get our tallies or our totals, however you want to do those. I hope I do this right. It'd be really embarrassing. Once you've got all your tallies, all your totals for each one of your classes, double check. It does not hurt to add straight down your frequency to make sure that you have all of your data. So if you add all this up, what should it equal? Well, they told us how many pieces of data we have, 25. So this would be, what, 1325? It's just a built-in double check. If you miss one piece of data, everything's going to be messed up. So verify that you're there. So then percent is frequency over n. We just said that n was 25, right? That's the sample size. We had 25 Army inductees. So we're going to do 5 over 25, 7 over 25, frequency over n, frequency over n. When I do all that math, I'll go to a calculator. I'm going to round to the nearest whole percentage, I guess. So 5 divided by 25, I believe that's a 0.2. Multiply by 100, I get 20%. Double check my math. Feel free to hit pause and go ahead and do the math. Make sure you know where these numbers are coming from. I think when I wrote them out, that kind of made sense. When you add up all of your percentages, what should you get down here in your total row? Should be 100%, right? Everything added together. Could you ever not have 100%? Comes down to rounding. As far out as you round, if you round a lot, you might have a 99%, or you could potentially have 101%. If you go out an extra decimal place, like I did not, you might come closer, but you still could have a 99.8%. So it comes down to rounding, but we know after or before rounding, everything should add up to 100%. All right, so that's easy because that's qualitative data. Quantitative data is where we're going to do a little bit more math to get everything set up. So first of all, there's a few rules. All of your classes must be equal width. You can't be jumping around. You can't go like we talked about on misleading graphs or misleading stats. The y-axis has to be equal. You can't be jumping around. Your classes have to be equal. You have to make sure that all values between your highest and lowest values are included. So your range of values, you can't start with 20 if your lowest value is 15. 15 would not end up on your frequency table. You have to have values in at least the first and last class. You could have no values in one of the ones in the middle, but you have to have a value in the start and the value in the last. And last but not least, your classes may not overlap. I can't have a number that could potentially go in 2 different classes. That's a problem. It's not a correctly put together table. So if we're going to make a frequency distribution using quantitative data, first thing you need to do is find your range. Find your highest and lowest class limits. That's the range, right? Biggest number is this, smallest number is this. subtract them, and determine your class width. Easier said than done. I'm going to add a little extra right here under step 2. In order to determine the class width, you're going to do a quick division problem. You're going to do your range divided by the number of classes. I will always tell you how many classes I want you to have on your table. Don't get stressed about that. It will be there. If we do our own data, you might say, is it okay if I do 7 classes? And I'm going to say yes. After you know what your class width is going to be, you'll also always define your class limits. So you'll start writing in the first column of your frequency table. And then you will use your tally marks and find your frequency distribution. So let's do one. Now, I first of all want to tell you, in this, notice I've already got your class limits set up for you, but I want you to see where they came from. So these are the ages of wealthiest people as of 2018. So we could probably add 2 to everything here, but we'll just stick with what we've got. So I've got this little table. It's full of data. I need to find my highest and my lowest values, my upper and my lower class limits. Well, it looks like to me, tell me if I'm wrong, I think 90 is the highest. And what do we got for our lowest? I see a 36. 34? Is 34 our lowest? So if I do my 90 minus 34, my range is 56. And I'm going to do my range divided by the number of classes. Well, I'm going to have to tell you in the directions, or you're going to look at the table and say there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spots for classes. I should have typed that up in the directions, but since I filled in the classes for you, I didn't. So 56 divided by 6, that does not come out exact. That's like 9 point something, isn't it? 9.3 or something like that. Make yourself a little note right here. Always round up for class list. Sorry, always round up for class limits. No, let me say it differently. Always round up for class width. Up. I'll get it. For class, I'll write it right. Width. No matter what, I know 9.3 something would round down. We're always going to round up no matter what. If you got a whole number, if that 56 divided by 6 for some weird math reason came out to be exactly 9, I would round up to 10 for my class width. So my class width is equal to 10 because it was 9 point anything, and that rounds up to 10. Notice my classes are already filled out for you. I just wanted you to see them. When I go from the lower limit to the next lower limit, that is a class width of 10. So lower limit to next lower limit, 10. So your class width won't be the actual class. 34 to 43 feels like 9 to me, but when I go from one class to the next, it's always 10 higher, or whatever your class width is. That is a tricky thing. Please watch out for that. All right, so now we've got our upper and lower limit. We found our range. We did our range divided by a number of classes. We defined our class limits, so writing in those 34 to 43. So when I know I'm going up 10 every time, if I didn't have the end numbers on here, but I know my class width is 10, well, I'm just going to say, well, if this goes from 34 to 44, this one has to end at 43. If this goes from 44 and jumps to 54 for the next class, that has to end at 53. So you're going to be able to fill those in, do the lower class limits on each side, and then you fill in the upper class limit. All right, once you do that, now we're going to start doing our tally marks and find our frequency marks. I'm going to go through this, take a quick minute. Feel free to hit pause, do it yourself. Actually, I'm going to hit pause, I'm going to fill it in, and then I'll come back. All right, welcome back. I hope you have the same tally marks I do. If you don't, go back and double check them. I'm pretty sure I'm right on this. Notice our third column says just frequency. I don't want percentage there. I just want frequency, so I actually did this already. I just put it in the wrong column. Look at your column titles. If it says percentage, then we're going to go through and we're going to figure out percentages. That one last double check, if I add up all my frequencies, what should they add up to be? Well, it told me that this is the 50 top wealthiest people in the United States. So if I'm thinking my math's right here, this should add up to sample size of 50. So do that double checking. That's always there. And we're good from there. All right. So that's all I got for this first section, 2-1A. Fun times, right? So we get to do a little bit of frequency tables. Remember to look at your headings, make sure if it asks you for percentage or if it just asks you for the frequency itself. Class limits are the trickiest part. Remember those rules about they all have to be equal and things like that. That is it. See you next time for 2-1B.